Hey, welcome back to the channel. This is Dave. Today we're going to look at another record. Before we get started today, I really want to talk a little bit about my channel and about what I do with these album reviews. On this channel, you're not going to see me review something like Led Zeppelin 4 or Physical Graffiti. And the reason why is because if you don't know how great these records are, then you should be eating steak with a spoon in a padded room. No, I mean seriously, there's some records that I shouldn't have to sit there and be like, oh yeah, let me review this record because I feel like it's obvious. So I'm trying to pick out albums that I think are not obvious, that you might want to check out. Now, me personally, I love when somebody recommends music to me because I go check it out. And it's something different. And if you find a gem out of 10 records, I find something that I love, it was worth it. So this brings me to my youth. There was a record store, well, there's a couple of record stores here in south of Boston. And I would go into them and I would look at album covers. And being a kid, I really didn't know an awful lot about. There wasn't like the internet and nobody had all this information, so I'd be looking at records and I'm like, oh, I heard that Rainbow song, let me see, and then look at all the Rainbow album covers. And I remember one time looking through them, I was like, I bought Long Live Rock and Roll one day. I became a huge Rainbow fan ever since, which was funny because I was never a huge Deep Purple fan. I liked them, but again, like Machine Head to me was like, and Made in Japan, I always just thought it was like, I don't know. It just didn't do anything for me. And I loved Rainbow. So then I would see these Whitesnake albums, and of course you're picking up big records, turning them over, and I could see the credits on there, and I could see that it's half of Deep Purple. And I was always afraid to pull the trigger on it. I'm like, I don't know if I'd like this. I haven't heard anything about it. And I'm talking like 1980, 81. And so onwards and upwards, I remember buying, whenever the hell Motorhead's Iron Fist album came out, I bought Iron Fist. This is just purely on record covers because there was no access to this stuff. It wasn't on the radio. It wasn't playing. I remember I went and picked up the Queensryche EP when that came out, and that might have been 83 or 84. But anyways, so like around, I think it was 1984, Whitesnake started having a couple of songs on the radio, Slow and Easy, and Slide It In was, Love Ain't No Stranger. And so I went and got this album. And that's the album that I'd like to review today, is the US edition of Slide It In by Whitesnake. Before we go further, I also got the album that was after that, which I thought was like a little too much glitzy and glam and overproduction. And it's the difference for me is, the Whitesnake album, just called Whitesnake, is like the Sgt. Pepper, and I'm more of a Revolver, Rubber Soul kind of guy. And Slide It In was that Revolver album. Rubber Soul then would have been like Ready and Willing from 1980, which is a great record, and I highly recommend it. I'm just not going to review it today. I was thinking about doing both of them, and I'm like, no, I won't. But the highlights on that song, I mean, just forget about the opening track, Fool for Your Lovin', which he later redid with Vi on guitar. The new version stinks compared to the version on Ready and Willing. And Carry Your Load, and the song Ready and Willing, just awesome. But today we're going to take a look at Slide It In, and the US edition at that. So Whitesnake up to this point had been using producer Martin Birch, who I love. He did Deep Purple stuff. He produced the 1980 Heaven and Hell album for Black Sabbath. He did all the Iron Maiden stuff. The guy's great. For some reason, they started off the production of this album with Eddie Kramer and then got rid of him. I think Eddie did 2 songs on this album. I think it's Gambler and Guilty of Love. But anyway, so they ended up getting rid of him for whatever reason, and I can only imagine. I'm not a huge Eddie Kramer fan. I don't really care for the stuff he's produced. I mean, I know he's engineered on some big records, but as production goes, I'm not a big fan of his producing. He also was hired, I believe, in like 1980 to produce AC/DC. Oh, no, not 1980, 79 to do Highway to Hell, and he didn't like the way they worked, and they didn't like him. And that's how they got Robert Mutt Lange. But anyways, so they ended up bringing Martin Birch back into the fold, which I think was a great thing. And I think this was also the first album without Mick Moody. And they basically mixed it and had it ready for a UK release when I believe the label got it and wanted to do some changes. And they added John Sykes on guitar on a bunch of songs for the leads. And the bass, I believe they got Neil Murray to play bass on the US album, and then it was remixed by Keith Olsen, who's awesome as well. But anyways, let's take a look at this stuff, and then I'll talk a little bit more, just in general. Getting back real quickly before we go into this album. So the stuff that I'm suggesting to you as a listener would be something that has definitely penetrated my ears and has really resonated with me, influenced me. Everything, obviously, if I hear something, influences me, but these things are things that I like to draw against. And so there's going to be some albums where you're going to be like, who the hell is this? And I just hope you have the open mind to go check it out and see what it's all about, because there's a lot of great music out there, and it's just, now that the internet is kind of leveling the playing field a little bit, there's some music sneaking through the cracks. But for years, you have the label putting millions of dollars into these big bands, and you're missing a lot of great music. And if we take a look at Whitesnake, you can look at how much the Whitesnake album, Slip of the Tongue, those albums had big money behind them, and everyone knows those records, which is criminal when you go back and you listen to how great Ready and Willing is, or Come and Get It. The early stuff is great. Saints and Sinners. There's just some great music there that wasn't necessarily getting the push. Anyways, let's take a look at this record. So since I had the US release, I now have both versions, but that's what I started on, and it's also, I prefer it. I'm going to go in the order because there's a different track order on the UK release, so I'm going to go in the order on the US release. The first song is Slide It In, which is just a raucous type of rock and roll song that, you could hear like, what is that song? Ain't Nothing But a Good Time by Poison kind of ripped it, but it has that real, it also kind of reminds me a little bit of the Raspberries, that opening riff in Please Go All the Way. But it's a great song. It's a great rock and roll song. It's a great anthem. And it's just, I love it. It's a great song. It's a great album starter because it hits you hard and it's just good stuff. The next song is Slow and Easy. Now, Slow and Easy, I believe this one was written by Mick Moody with David before Mick left the band. Very Zeppelin. Kind of reminds me a little bit of In My Time of Dying, but it still has a little bit more pop element than that song. The vocal when he screams is outstanding. In fact, it reminds me of, I think that Chris Cornell kind of paid homage to it in a song called Room 1,000 Years Wide off of Bad Motorfinger, with that scream that he does in this song. But anyways, Slow and Easy, this was one of the hits on the record. This was one of the songs that made me run out and buy this album, and it's great. And as a number 2 track on the record, it's like boom, boom, 1-2 hit. The next song is more like a ballad. It's called Love Ain't No Stranger. Starts off slow, then picks up. it is my favorite track on the record. It's great. And it's basically, I don't think there's a song on any album afterwards that's better than Love Ain't No Stranger. It's definitely my favorite Whitesnake song. Song 4 on the album is All or Nothing. Just a monster riff. Kind of reminds me of Billy Gibbons-ish a little bit. Just that, like, makes you do this. And if a song can make you do this, it's just nasty. It's great. It's got that great riff. Just pure rock and roll. Again, right up there with the first three. So far, I mean, it's just slamming you. Gambler is the next song, and this is definitely like a hard driving, haunting, I would say a little bit more up tempo, but a Cashmere type feel of a song. But great. I mean, these are all just great songs. So far, we haven't had a weak one in the bunch. I think Gambler is a great song. I like the chromatic descending harmony in the chorus. It's just great. Now we would flip over the side. If you had it on a record or on a CD, it's just the next song is Guilty of Love. And it's great. It's pop. It is like, this I would consider to be more starting to lean into the hair band sound of the next record. But it's definitely a pop song. Great writing. I mean, I can't say enough good about it. The next song on the album is Hungry for Love. Now, this is probably my least favorite song on the record. Reminds me of like early Kiss. It's a little uninspired. I can't say I love it. I mean, I like it, and when I listen to the album, it flows, so it has a nice flow on the album, and it's good. And it's a good song. It's just not like on par with the rest of the album, in my opinion. The next song is called Give Me More Time, and this is definitely back to bad boy rock and roll stuff. Kind of reminds me at points of a little AC/DC, and it also kind of reminds me of back to Fool for Your Lovin' era, the Ready and Willing album. Definitely has some nice chords, some changes. It's not your predictable rock stuff. It's really good. I don't know if it's on par with the first 4 songs on the album. Again, I think so far those are the strongest, but it's definitely a great song. The 9th song on the album is called Spit It Out. Spit It Out reminds me of a Kiss song if Kiss were good. No. And don't get me wrong, I love the first 3 Kiss albums. I just find the lyrics and especially the later stuff, I just can't stand it, like in the 80s. To me, this would be the song that Kiss should have done in the 80s instead of Lick It Up. Odd, isn't that weird? They should have done Spit It Out, not Lick It Up. But it's true. To me, that's what it sounds like. Still a great song and a great flow to the record. This is like, there is not a bad song on this album. And like I said, and so Spit It Out's a great song. I just feel like it's in that vein of like Kiss should have heard it and been like, we should have done that. The last song is Standing in the Shadow. And this to me shows the band as being, the writing is great. It's a great rock song, but there's great melody here. The hook is good. It's not typical of what you would hear, and it's a great closeout for the album. And it's a great song. And I wanted to bring up this album because I was shocked when I talk about this album to people, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm not really familiar with it." And I'm like, "What?" People are more familiar with the one with Here I Go Again, and it's like the Is This Love? And to me, that's all right, but it's not my favorite. And I have to give credit. I have a good friend of mine who's an unbelievable, one of the best guitar players I've ever come across, Howie Simon. And Howie and we used to talk music and whatnot, and he brought up Whitesnake to me, and I'm like, oh, I love Slide It In. And he's like, yeah, it's a great album, but what about the albums before it? And I'm like, I don't really know them. And he turned me on to them, and I was like, and I'm very thankful because it was like I had missed, and I remember when I got those records, and I was looking at the covers, and I'm like, oh, I remember this when I was a kid. I used to see this album cover all the time, and I would always question whether I should buy it. Well, I learned I was wrong. I should have pulled the trigger because Howie had turned me on to like this Ready and Willing album, and I'm like, where the hell was I? Like these are great songs. They're just. They're fantastic. I mean, I know where I was. I was home listening to Judas Priest, and I loved Rainbow, and I mean, I loved, and oddly enough, it was funny. The Rainbow album that I ended up getting last, or held out the longest for, Rainbow Rising, ended up being my favorite. Although I do love Long Live Rock and Roll. But anyways, yeah. So I missed the boat on this Whitesnake stuff, and so I'm gonna be bringing up records, that you might not be cool with the band, or you might not think it's very guitar oriented, but that's just who I am. I listen to everything. I'm not really one thing I can't stand is, if you've ever watched that TV show, that Metal Show with Eddie Trunk and Don Jameson and Jim Florentine. So it was a great. I mean, he's got some great records of terrorizing telemarketers that I love. But anyways, these guys, it's like, if it's metal, it's good with them. That's all they care about is metal. Metal music, it's good. And I'm like, in every genre of music, there's great, there's good, and there's absolute crap. And a lot of times they're bringing up crap. And I'm like, yeah, that sucks. And I hate that you're on this show called That Metal Show, and you can't ever say, well, that album stinks, or this band's not good. Because it's metal, they feel like they have to stand together, which I find to be like real silly. Because music's music, and it's like, there's some great country albums. There's some great country music. If you want to go to the old 60s, you can pull out George Jones. I mean, White Lightning and The Race Is On. There's just great music throughout all genres of music. If you want to listen to great rap, and you guys might say, that's crap. Yeah, well, listen to Guru Jazzmatazz, the song When You're Near Me, with India Davenport singing background, or New York Transit Ride. It's or Time to Play on that album. Or listen to Spearhead, the album Home, or Chocolate Superhighway. There's great music, or even Tribe Called Quest, Black Sheep. There's great music in all styles. It doesn't matter, and I find it like if you're listening to alternative, The Cure had some great records. The Smiths were great. If you're listening, Depeche Mode had some amazing records. There's great songs in all these places, and you should go into it with an open mind. In fact, if you listen to Depeche Mode, Rammstein does a great version of Stripped, which is off a Depeche Mode album. I think it's Black Celebration, but it's great. And there's so many great songs, and it's funny if you just figure out, like, oh, well, that melody and that is really cool. I could color that and make it like this. Whatever. It's like, if music were food, I'd be a foodie. I'm the guy, so it would be like, oh, that's chicken. Oh, I don't like, yeah, if you don't like chicken, which I don't know anyone that doesn't like chicken, but if you don't like chicken, you're not going to like it no matter what spice is on it. But if you like chicken, you're going to like it whatever spice is on it. Now, some spices you're going to like better than others, but it's still chicken. So it's like, which is why you can find, like, some country songs that crossed over and became R&B hits. I know John Michael Montgomery had the song "I Could Love You Like That," and that became an R&B hit. And he did "I Swear," and that became an R&B hit. There's just so much stuff that can cross over, because we're all doing the same thing. It's all music, and it's all about melodies. And it's funny to me that that's why I bring up, so I brought up Devo. And the reason why I bring up Devo is because they're brilliant. These guys are very clever, very funny. A lot of it's tongue-in-cheek, but it's really clever music. And, Oingo Boingo's the same way, Danny Elfman. And I read an article on Facebook somewhere where Danny Elfman was embarrassed by his Oingo Boingo days. I'd be embarrassed by your soundtrack stuff. It's okay. It's not the greatest. You're not John Williams. Yeah, you wrote a couple of good things, but those Oingo Boingo albums resonated with a lot of people. And to say you're embarrassed by it or whatever is like, kind of like a smack to them. I mean, it's great stuff. Steve Bartek's guitar playing, the horns. John Avalar's later bass playing when he came in the band. There's a record called Danny Elfman's Solo, which is technically an Oingo Boingo album, but I think they were switching to MCA and they couldn't use the Oingo Boingo name yet because they were still dealing with the other label, which I can't remember what the other label was, but they were going on MCA. But there's a song on that Danny Elfman solo called The Last Time. It's awesome. I mean, it's great. There's so many great songs. Home Again off of the album Boingo. I mean, I just think there's so much great music out there. And there's so much to learn from other players. And I remember trying to pick off those Steve Bartek licks, and I'm like, it's different, and it's a different approach, and it may not be as technical or as crazy as the Yngwie Malmsteen stuff, but it's like, but there's something there. It's something really interesting, and that's all I wanted to say. So I want you to go out and get that Whitesnake record. Go listen to the earlier stuff. But give some other music a chance, and, there's lots of great stuff out there. I just want to say real quickly, I remember when a friend of mine was trying to turn me on to Tom Waits. And this is probably right around 1990. And he played me some stuff, and I was like, yeah, I don't get it. I just don't get it. And then I was listening to, I think it was like NPR radio, and someone was talking about this homeless guy. Somebody recorded a homeless guy singing, and then Tom Waits recorded this song over it. I forget what it was. Jesus Blood Hasn't Failed Me Yet. Anyway, fantastic. I was like, whoa, this is good. So then I called my buddy. I was like, hey, listen, I just heard something that just struck me. It resonated with me. Let me borrow that Tom Waits Blue Valentine's album. And, it was like a light went on. Instantly, I was a huge fan. I got it. It was like, I totally get him. And he has some blues songs on there, like $29, which is like a standard blues. But when he does it, and I'm a person that I'm openly just do not like blues. But here's a guy singing it, and it's different, and I liked it. And just be open, give music a chance. There's a lot of people out there posting stuff on SoundCloud and on YouTube, and not all of it's great, but there might be something there that's very good. So I hope somehow this channel enriches you to that fact that you can get something from this, and if anything, you get turned on to good music. Anyways, for today, I'm out. Very good.